January 16th, 27 adjustments to order. Will you call the roll, please?
Ralph Oliver,
Here.
Wayne Kowski,
Yes.
George Dillon,
Yes.
Howard Bowden,
Here.
Jimmy Rogers.
Here.
All right, our first item on the agenda is to approve the minutes from our last meeting, which was in November. I trust everybody's had a chance to look at those. If there's any questions, comments?
I have one correction on the second page, down about halfway down, where it says Edward Charles says something. It says here, yes, I have checked the clock energy and the house used to be transformer from the pole. I think it meant to be used to be serviced by the transformer from the pole.
Okay.
All right, we've noted the correction. Any other questions, comments? If not, I'll open the floor for a motion.
I move that we accept the minutes with the correction.
Have a second?
Second.
Call the roll, please.
Ralph Oliver,
Yes.
Wayne Kowski,
Yes.
George Dillon,
Yes.
Howard Bowden.
Yes.
Jimmy Rogers.
Yes.
All right, gentlemen, we have one item on the agenda tonight. It's a conditional use permit for 470 Hackett Pike, Tennessee Gas Pipeline, compressor station 875. Is there someone here representing them?
Hi,
All right, you want to come to the podium and state your name for me, please?
my name is Daniel Maxian, it's M-A-X-I-A-N.
All right, Mr. Maxim, do you agree to give truthful and accurate information as it pertains to this case?
I do.
All right, continue.
Thank you. Members of the board, my name is Daniel Maxian with Tennessee Gas Pipeline from Houston, Texas. I'm the Director of Project Management for Tennessee Gas Pipeline in this area. I'm a licensed professional engineer and responsible for the development and execution of the Broadrun Expansion Project. The Broadrun Expansion Project as a whole is a natural gas expansion project on our existing pipeline facility. It is for the the expansion and flowing of 200 million a day, 200 million standard cubic feet a day of gas out of the West Virginia area down our system to the Gulf Coast in Texas. This project is not about oil, it's not about natural gas liquids, it's about the expansion and compression of clean burning pipeline quality natural gas. As part of that, there's 10 items here in the conditional use permit that I want to discuss with you guys today. We'll go through each one of them. At the end, I'll take questions from the board here, and then turn it over to you to see if there's any additional questions you guys might have regarding our application for consideration. So, going through the permit application here, there's a couple items to start with. One is the location and siting of compressor station 875. A lot of things go into consideration when we look to site a compressor station. Certainly existing pipeline hydraulics, topography of the land, density of population around our site, sensitive areas, proximity to pipelines, wetlands, other environmental conditions. And ultimately, the site we chose here along 470 Hackett Pike met those conditions better than the other alternatives we examined. We actually looked at 5 different alternatives here in this area that were considered. Ultimately, they did not fit the best application for our site, which this site did. So, as you can see, kind of on the board here, the overall area is about 80. Let me make sure I get it right here. 87 acres in size. Of which only 25 of those 87 acres will ultimately be disturbed in its final form for the operation of the compressor station itself. And it'll actually be set kind of in the far west portion of the site, kind of in that almost squared off area west of the pond and east of the railroad tracks there, as you can kind of see on the board over here on our graphical display. As part of that, we look for residential density. Certainly along Hackett Pike, there is development. There's development to the west of the railroad tracks. Our closest resident structure is approximately 1,300 feet away from the building itself, and that's to the southwest of our site, actually across the railroad tracks. I think it's property there 0018cc to the southwest there. So we do take a lot of factors into consideration. We look to buy pieces of land that are considerably larger than what we ultimately need, mostly to try and provide a buffer. We want to provide space from us and our facility to the folks around us. Obviously, every property edge has an abutting landowner. We understand that, and we certainly try to take that into consideration. We also try to take the existing topography and site our facilities such that we're not only not disturbing as much as the land as possible, but trying to physically hide ourselves down there, right? So there's pros and cons to being down at the bottom of the hill. One, when you look from the east, visually we're pretty well hidden from Hackett Pike, but as you kind of go down the bottom of the hill and get close to the railroad tracks, we do open ourselves up to some visual sight lines from the north and south, and we'll talk about that here a little bit later in the application. But that's why we chose where we are. And I forgot to mention earlier, as we went through this application process with the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, they have also agreed that this is the appropriate siting and have certificated and approved the project as part of their regulatory process. So that's item number 1 on the conditional use permit. Number 2 relates to noise, equipment, and attenuation. Certainly, concern with compressor facilities is noise. As required by the FERC, once in operation, this facility can emit no more than 55 decibels of noise at the closest noise-sensitive area, which, as I mentioned earlier, is approximately 1,300 feet away to the southwest. 55 decibels, by comparison, is maybe like a refrigerator or a dishwasher, babbling brook, a light conversation. I'm talking louder than 55 decibels right now. By comparison, so it's actually a pretty quiet and steady noise state. One of the things that was brought up at our public meeting was noise frequency. So it's a lower frequency noise. It's more of a hum, and not a high pitched or maybe less comforting type noise. With that being said, the building that this unit will be housed in is designed for noise and temperature insulation. So the noise obviously inside the building is considerably louder than outside the building. What we talked about is the 55 decibels at closest structures. Certain parts of the building will have up to 9 inches of insulation on the inside. It's designed to absorb noise. On our blowdown stack actually has a silencer or muffler on it to help reduce noise. The pipelines are designed with a certain diameter to reduce vibration and acoustical noise from the gas flowing through it. So there's a lot of factors that are taken into consideration for reducing noise at our site. The other thing that goes into this is a lot of our noise predictions are based on engineering modeling. One thing we do have to prove to the FERC upon completion of construction is, did we meet our design requirement? Are we operating within the regulations? So after the facility is placed in service, we have 60 days to perform an actual live acoustical test of the facility to make sure it complies with the design requirements and the noise requirements. If it doesn't, it's upon Tennessee to provide additional noise attenuation to get down to that 55 decibels. We don't think we're going to have to do anything else. We think we got a pretty solid design, and we'll meet or exceed that 55 decibel level. So that's the noise consideration for item number 2 here in the conditional use permit. Item number 3 talks about water bodies, sensitive areas, and setbacks. As the gentleman mentioned here a little bit earlier before the meeting started, there's a pond right there in the middle of our site, and that pond will actually remain there during and after construction. And as part of that, we want to make sure we're protecting sensitive areas and water bodies. Not only is it required by the FERC and their upland and wetland plans and procedures, but certainly something that good stewards of the environment and competent operators and contractors do as well. So we're required to install reinforced silt fence around sensitive areas on the downhill or downstream edge of drainage areas. This is erosion control and drainage control fabric fencing. There is certain distance setbacks we have from sensitive areas. At a minimum, it is 50 feet as set forth in our application with the FERC. There are some areas where we might encroach upon that 50 feet, and if so, we actually have incremental silt fencing and other things that we have to install per FERC's plan and procedures that we have to comply with. On top of all that, a third-party inspector, not employed by Tennessee Gas, but actually directly reporting to the FERC in an environmental capacity, will be on site, if not daily, a very regular basis, to inspect environmental conditions on the site. This includes silt fencing. This includes what we'll get into in a little bit here, which is dust control and fugitive dust emissions. They'll look to make sure we're following the rules. This is actually something that Tennessee Gas pays for, but they don't report to us. They report directly to the FERC. So there is somebody there to make sure that we're following the rules and doing everything that we're supposed to do. So setbacks of sensitive areas is certainly something we're concerned with and have taken it into consideration with our design as part of this project. Next item number 4, dust control measures and revegetation. So we will have an access road coming off of Hackett Pike that traverses westward down the property to our operational area. As much extent practical, that access road will be asphalt paved so as to reduce dust emissions during construction. At the end of it, we'll obviously touch it up and kind of refinish it. It'll probably be a little bit disturbed during construction. For areas that will be temporarily disturbed during construction, there are mitigation measures in place for watering disturbed areas to help prevent dust from blowing off with the wind. Construction traffic, equipment, vehicles will be kept in a clean and orderly manner to make sure that we're not tracking a bunch of mud and dirt and everything out on the Hackett Pike and out onto the county roads in the area. So there are certain things, and again, these are things that are going to get inspected on a regular basis by these FERC environmental monitors to make sure that we're following through with the plans and the requirements set forth in our certificate. With respect to revegetation, as quickly or as promptly as possible, when we're done with temporarily disturbed areas, when we're done with work in certain areas, we want to revegetate that, not only because it's a requirement, but when it rains on dirt, it just gets messy. And ultimately, we got to get grass growing back here. We got to get this site back to existing or prior condition. We look to use approved seed mixes either through the state of Kentucky or the Madison County Co-op extension. So we want to use native seeds and grass planting. There are plans in place for invasive species monitoring and elimination, either through herbicides or pesticides or other natural means. So we want to make sure that we're not going to introduce something into the area that will become a nuisance not only on our property. We want to make sure we get rid of that and just have native grass and seed that are coming back in for revegetation areas. Item number 5, architectural design. I think this is a big concern. And I've got a couple of boards over here to the left. This is an aerial view of the proposed station. It kind of shows the existing kind of farm access road coming off the Hackett Pike, as well as our access road into the facility here. This is a combination of asphalt and gravel paving down here around our proposed facility. I'm going to flip back to this page here in the bottom. There we go. And it kind of shows our buildings in relation to a little bit more of an architectural rendering. So the buildings will actually be painted green on the sides and have white trim, probably a white roof as well. And let me pull it up here. So the big building you see kind of in the back there, that's our main compressor building. Its dimensions are 120 feet in length by 74 feet in width. And then some of the next building over there is approximately 70 by 30 in feet. The height of it is at the top of the compressor building is approximately 45 feet. The exhaust next to it is, let me grab that here, 71 feet in height. So you'll see the eave of the building there, the ridge of the building is about 46 feet and approximately 25-30 feet higher than that is the top of our engine exhaust. So what we want to do is we wanted to make sure we weren't just putting a truly commercial building. It's a steel building, it's a painted steel building. We wanted to somewhat blend in with other buildings in the area, so it shows a dark green color in paint with some white trim to provide at least a little bit of a aesthetically pleasing look to the facility. Next item on there, landscaping. Another concern of what we have, and I'm going to put my other boards back up here. So after some of the meetings we had with county officials, we actually contracted with a licensed Kentucky landscape architect to help us look into some different landscaping options. A couple of things we considered obviously is the contour of the site and how that relates to the area around us. And in the application that was submitted with the board, we talked about planting approximately somewhere between 45 and I think 77 trees to the areas north, east, and south of our operational area. There are some concerns about planting along the west. We're a little bit constrained in space just due to the proximity of the railroad track to our operational area. However, there is existing trees there. We plan to leave them there. We're going to try and maintain, obviously, all the trees around the perimeter. We don't have any construction activities along the perimeter of the site, certainly on north and south. But as you can see here, this actually shows some incremental plantings here to the north of our operational area, as well as we filled in some other spots down here. I think the drawing on the application you have actually shows a little bit more of a robust plan. I think more on the magnitude of 150 trees that would be planted and would actually just increase the density of plantings in and around the operational area. And these are trees that are consistent with Madison County Cooperative Extension, so trees that are native to the area and will help grow and not only help provide a visual buffer, but also an acoustical buffer once they mature and provide a little bit of kind of a blending in with the area around it. So that plan's a little bit still in development, but I think what's on file, the verbiage in the application and then the drawing are a little bit incongruous. The drawing probably is going to dictate there with the higher number of tree plantings. And we wanted to do that to make sure we're blending in excuse me, to the area around us and providing a good visual buffer from the newly constructed facility. Next item on the list is blasting. At present, no blasting is anticipated to construct this facility. So I don't want to gloss over it, but we don't plan on doing any blasting. However, if during construction we determine that blasting is necessary, there's a pretty robust review process and authorization process, not only at the local, but also state and federal level here in the state of Kentucky to have blasting authorized. But as I mentioned before, no blasting is planned for our project. Next item, number 8, is emissions and pollution control. So the EPA sets forth and empowers the state through the Clean Air Act and the National Ambient Air Quality Standards, a set of pollutant criteria that the state of Kentucky, the Kentucky DEP, specifically the Division of Air Quality, defines and permits air quality and air emissions at these sites. The proposed facility is actually considered a minor source in the state of Kentucky. We applied for the permit back in January of 2015, and I have it in my notes here, but I believe it was granted in the fall of 2015. So we do have the air permit from the state of Kentucky. On top of that, being a minor source, we actually purchased and plan to install with this unit a clean burning technology called SoloNOx. It's from the engine manufacturer Solar. It's actually a low NOx producing control technology within the engine. So it actually does a very tight air-fuel mixture that increases the percentage of combustion each time the engine goes into a burning cycle. There's actually a lot of controls and monitors that make sure that it's burning at a high efficiency rate. If it comes out of the parameters that will adjust the emissions, the engine actually will shut down and turn off. So if we're not, if the engine isn't burning clean enough, the engine will actually turn itself off and make a phone call to our operations personnel to come out and take a look at it. So there are some safeguards from an emissions perspective to make sure that the clean burning technology that's installed in this engine actually performs right. Next item on here, number 9, spill control and countermeasures. Similar to water body runoff, there's several things that take into account on spill control. So each one of Tennessee Gas's facility has a site-specific spill prevention and countermeasures plan. So all of our storage tanks, and they're not overly big, they're maybe 10,000 gallon storage tanks for holding lube oil and other lubrication chemicals for our machinery there. All of those have secondary containment at approximately 110% of the volume level. So even if the tank is 100% full and it did have a leak, our secondary containment will hold 100% of that plus some. So we have secondary containment for our stored products on site. Additionally, when we start talking about runoff and water runoff, our design also includes a stormwater retention pond kind of to the northwest of our site. Obviously, when you develop some property and we have some incremental impervious area, we need to make sure that we're not affecting drainage off our property site. So we've taken into account the fact that we do have some increased impervious area, and we are taking that into account with a stormwater detention pond, which will be kind of on the northwest side. Other areas that aren't being modified or changed, so kind of to the southeast of our property there, that'll stay the same as it naturally drains today. We're not over there doing any work, so that will stay native to what it is. But I bring up that point because I think it's, we're going to have some development there, and it's important for us to make sure that we're calculating our drainage impacts in the area around us. This site isn't in the floodplain, so as far as any detriment to water sources around us, we certainly take that into account when designing our facility. Last item on the conditional use permit, number 10, is road bonding. Sorry, Mr. Oliver mentioned to me we had a typo or an error in our application. We referenced Hackett Road rather than Hackett Pike. With respect to the road bonding, certainly we want to make sure we get the names right, but our construction contractor will work with the county when it comes time to actually bond the appropriate county roads that we plan on using for access to the site, not only for just daily construction traffic, but also equipment and material deliveries. So it is fully our intention to work with you guys to bond the appropriate county roads that we'll be using to access the site. So with that, those are the 10 items in the conditional use permit that I wanted to present to the board for consideration. We were required to look into these items as part of our operations requirement, as far as our federal regulatory requirements. But additionally, I think they're good items that make sure we're doing the right thing by developing this property in this area, looking at environmental considerations, noise, visual aesthetics, and the like. So with that, I'll accept any questions or comments and turn it over to the board for consideration.
Just real quickly, can I ask you to, for those that don't know, that maybe don't know what FERC is,
Sure.
why you reference them so much, who they are, what their role in the process was?
Sure. So the FERC is the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, and Tennessee Gas Pipeline is an interstate natural gas transmission pipeline. They're our federal regulator. So there are certain transmission companies out there, different companies that are regulated at the state level. Tennessee Gas is regulated at the federal level. So review and authorization for our projects, our maintenance, our ability to operate as a pipeline system is governed at the federal level by the FERC. In addition to that, we're also regulated by the Department of Transportation with PHMSA, and PHMSA stands for, well, I'm going to get this wrong, Pipeline Hazardous Material Safety Authorization Association? Administration, thank you. So we've got a couple of different agencies that not only regulate and review us for appropriateness at the environmental level, but also at the operational level.
All right, any of the board members have any questions?
I have a basic question. What is it actually that the compressor does?
So the compressor, the easiest way to think about it, it's a pump. So we call it a compressor because it's dealing with air or gas. It's dealing with gas. A pump would deal with liquids, right? So all we're doing is taking the natural gas product that's in the pipeline that exists on the property and in the area today. We bring it into the compressor. We take it from a lower pressure, boost it up to a higher pressure, and put it back into the pipeline to transport the gas further down the system.
You had mentioned that the maximum noise level is 55 decibels.
Yes, sir.
And is that also during the time of a controlled blast or a controlled purge? Blowdown?
Yeah, so during a blowdown, if it's a blowdowns last 3 minutes or less, and no, it will be louder than 55 decibels.
How loud is it when a blowdown occurs?
So I think it varies depending on whatever pressure the system's operating at. I think it's more in the 70 to 80 decibel range for about a 3 minute time period or less. We can validate that information and get it back, but I'm pretty sure that's about right.
In one area you had, in the packet you submitted, you talked about lighting, and where practical could you install motion censored lighting that goes off, or motion dimming lighting, so that, I know you've already got shields planned,
Right.
but something that would take away, being out in a rural and agricultural area, there's not a lot of bright lights out there.
Right.
And I think most residents kind of prefer it that way when they're looking in a rural area.
Sure. So I think there's probably some critical areas down in the operational zone down here where we need to have at least a couple of lights during the night. Certainly at our gate at the access road, I think we'd like to have a gate up there at Hackett Pike, or a light up at Hackett Pike on a 24-hour basis. But I think what we could look into doing, and I think what's plausible, is to have non-critical areas not lit at night. However, certain areas would still need to have lights on, just from a security protocol basis.
One of the things that you said also was that you anticipated 73 workers to construct, for the construction. Has the construction bids already gone out? Do you already have a construction
We do.
company to do this?
We do.
Now, have they been doing it in West Virginia and Tennessee, or is this? just
So,
a
so
connection?
this company does work all over the United States. They have done work for us in many states along the Gulf Coast. I think they've also they're contracted to do some work actually for us in West Virginia as well. So they are familiar with the region and have worked in the area.
And when you talked about workers, when you talked about the 73, you said that 90% of them will come from outside the area.
Right.
So that within Madison County, you'd only hire about 7 people to help with the construction?
Well, you know, these are approximate numbers based on what we've established in our plan. I think to the extent practical that our construction contractor can hire labor in the area, I think they do so. There's certain the way these guys are set up. There's certain core workers that they have as part of their business that will travel with them from their home office or their regional office up to the work site. But I think as they can and hire local personnel, I think they try to. But I don't know that there's a guarantee that 5 or 6 or 10 people would be hired, whether it be Madison County or here in the local area.
The other thing on personnel is that how many people man the site once it's up and running?
So the facility is designed to be an unmanned station. So we can run unmonitored. However, we do have personnel in the area, and actually our operations personnel will hire incremental manpower that will be dedicated to this facility. So they'll be responsible for the station. They'll probably come by once or twice a day, just to monitor things, take a look at things, make sure everything's working right. So you will see some truck traffic, you know, F-150, work truck type traffic on a daily basis. But the facility is designed to run in an automated state. Now, 24 hours, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. It's in constant communication with our gas control in Houston, so we can real time monitor the situation, monitor how the facility is working, look at different parameters for operations, pressures, temperatures, and make sure it's working right. So it's monitored 100% of the time. In addition to that, our operations personnel have laptops that they basically carry with them 24 hours a day, and when they're on call, can log in from their computer really anywhere that they are and get a real-time read on what's going on in the facility and take action if needed.
So in case of an emergency, what would be the time required, or how long would it take for somebody to get there to solve the problem?
Well, as I'm under oath, I don't want to make up a number here and not be accurate with it. I can get back to you on that. So instead of answering, I'll provide that answer to you later. What I would say is that the facility is designed to prevent an emergency from happening. So there's a lot of redundant systems within the facility that turn it off before an emergency happens, right? So I mean, sometimes you can't plan for all scenarios. However, there's a lot of safety features in these facilities that we want it to protect itself. So as things get a little bit maybe out of sync with the normal operating condition, the engines will slow down, or the engines will turn themselves off. They'll send out alarm signals to the technicians to come out and look at it to make sure that it's protecting itself before an emergency or an incident happens. With respect to that, we also work with first responders. We do annual briefings with first responders. We bring them out to the facility prior to it going in service to brief them and give them a tour on what the facility is, where things are located, what to look out for, how to access the site, and how to approach it in the event of an incident. So we do work with the local folks to make sure that they have the ability to respond if necessary. But again, these facilities are designed to protect themselves in the event that no one is there.
Can you expand a little bit more on like safety protocol? How often are pressure devices tested? And I mean, is this something that's a yearly device, or is it once a month? Or?
So we perform annual testing on all of our devices, whether it be an emissions test or the valves, valve sequencing, closing of the emergency shutdown devices. So at a minimum, it's annual testing.
On the blowdowns, annual, you said they were annually comparable. There's a train track down there.
Right.
We might not know what 80 decibels are, but I know the sound of that train when it's going down through there. What's the comparable of that 80 decibels compared to that train?
Well,
Would it be louder than the train?
Well, one, I'm not sure I know how loud that train is, right? So, I think 80 decibels is less than a locomotive. So I would say that,
When
yes,
you
we're
talk about
quieter than
comparing it
the
to a
train.
refrigerator or dishwasher, I mean, that's very, very soft. So if that's at 55 decibels, I'm not thinking a generator is probably not as loud as 80 decibels.
Well, I mean, well, I guess it depends on what kind of generator you got, right?
Exactly.
So, yeah, I mean, the 80 decibels is not overly loud. I mean, lawnmowers, I think, are 85 to 88 decibels. I mean, that's kind of when you start getting into to local hearing protection and other things like that. But the other thing I'd like to add, and at the public meeting, I was a little bit misguided with our annual blowdown, right? So I talked about annually we're going to vent gas for about 2 to 3 minutes in a test, and actually we've made some design modifications that would reduce that to actually probably less than a minute, if not even less than 30 seconds. So we actually are planning to install some additional valves at the site so that when we do this emergency test, we're really testing valve sequencing and not testing the release of gas into the atmosphere. Which is really what the test is designed to do. So there's actually some improvements to design that will help reduce that time on an annual basis.
The noise level of a train is at 110 decibels.
Okay.
The site drawing that you have here is really, it's a desirable location as far as residents, et cetera.
Would you just repeat what she said though, so we can get it on record?
Sorry, yeah. My colleague mentioned that locomotives or trains are normally at 110 decibels in noise range. Reference. Thanks.
The site drawing that you have up there, it's a desirable location from residents and that. Are there any other plans to do any other building on that site up front, in the front of the property?
So
future plans?
no. Our operational area is the operational area, right? Up front, we typically return it to native condition. So what's out there now, I think, is just kind of native grass and everything else. And where it's buffer now, will be buffer in the future.
Anybody got anything else? If not, Mr. Maxim, I'll let you have a seat.
All right, thank you, Mr. Miller.
And I'll let the audience come up and speak if anybody wants to come up, speak for or against. And I'll give Mr. Maxim a chance to come up and rebut and answer questions after we listen to everybody. So, is there anybody out there that wants to come up and speak?
I will.
Come on up.
Know my name?
State your name and address for me, please, first.
Is this live streaming? Is it live streaming? I'm not giving my address, I'll whisper it to her though.
No, it's not.
It's
It's not live
Okay.
stream, this is taped, isn't it? Yeah.
All right, Kathy Mills, 237 Hackett Pike.
All right, Ms. Mills, do you agree to give truthful and accurate information as it pertains to this case?
Yes.
Continue.
One, I'm kind of disappointed because I'm about a mile down the road from this. And I only knew that this meeting was today because a friend told me. Hackett Pike residents are not being told about what's going on this road. Okay, most of them aren't. Pipelines has a habit of only telling people who abut that property. I've seen it happen with friends up in New Hampshire with Kinder Morgan, who was trying to do one up in Londonderry, where I grew up in New Hampshire. So I think you'd have a lot more people here opposing this if the residents on Hackett Pike, on Dallas, on Cedar View, and on Windy Ridge, if they knew about this. The sign that was there for the meeting is against the fence. Anyone driving is not going to see it well. So I'm really disappointed on how the county has put this out. I want to know what noise studies have been done, specifically by the county. Anyone who lives up on those ridges knows that sound travels. As a crow flies, I live 2 miles from the bypass. I can hear the bypass many days. As a crow flies, I live 5 miles from the racetrack. I can hear that in the summertime. The train, some days, it sounds like it's on Hackett Pike. Seriously. Okay. So you're talking about decimals and whatnot. What you're not failing to say is that this 55 is 24/7, a 24-hour, 7 days a week hum that we have to deal with. Would you want to live across the street from that? Probably not. Would you want to live down the road from it where noise just travels in such crazy ways from ridge to ridge and with the valleys? There's no, and the way the wind comes, you never know. We can hear when they were doing work over on the depot, I hear blasting, and that's fairly far. Okay, I lived in Maryland before moving here. So, and they would often blast on there, and I lived 10 minutes from where they would blast on that, on the depot up in Maryland. It was not nearly that bad. That's what so I'm concerned about the noise, how it moves around it, up on that ridge. And there really needs to be a study. I've read articles on other people who, when there is the blowdown, it's loud. The closer you are, it shakes the ground. Okay, I'm concerned about our underground water flowing and how it goes through the limestone. I'm concerned that the vibrations from these pipes, which I'm not sure, I haven't been at the other meetings because again, not really hearing information on these. Are these going to be used, the 70-year-old pipes, are they going to be used or are they going to be changed out? How safe are these 70-year-old pipes? What's the vibration going to do to the water, underground water? And in limestone, that can be really dangerous. When they did the new water pipes up Hackett Pike, I was told that it wouldn't change any of the water underground. But I ride my lawnmower every summer, and since that has happened, I have noticed new rivulets underground where my ground is sinking in straight little lines. It wasn't there before, it was there after. So if water pipes could possibly have caused that, what is the continued vibration of these pipes going to cause to the waterway? That site is less than a mile from water treatment from a sewage plant that's right on the creek. Is there going to be any concern over that if something does happen? The lighting, I can't recall which one brought it up. That's a really good point. We have so much light when you look over at the bypass, it's bright because of the dark, because of all the car lots. You can't see the sky very well at night. Most people like it out there because you can look up and see the stars. You put lights out there that are going to be on at night, it's going to glow. It's going to destroy the things that so many of us enjoy about that neighborhood, about living out there. Now, I've only lived there 3 years. I grew up in New England, I've grown up in Colorado, and for the last 15 years I was in Maryland, in a community where you couldn't really see the sky. I like seeing the sky at night. I like my kids going out and being able to see the constellations. I don't want to see that gone. I want to know if when the blowdown happens, are residents of the area going to be told? And I want to know if there's going to be blasting, are the residents, all the residents, not just the abutters, going to be told? That's all. Oh, and also, real estate value. That is a huge concern, I think, for everybody. If that thing is noisy, if we lose our, if those lights disrupt our nighttime views, it will hurt our real estate. If there's a constant hum, okay, a train going by once in a while, that comes in and out and it's gone. It's not constant. This is a constant thing. I oppose it. I think they can find other places. I don't think the good studies have been done on noise, and it concerns me. It concerns me for my health, for my children's health. I don't want construction going up and down that road. It's a narrow road. And I've seen how sometimes they drive up that road. Okay, and I'm on the one straightway. So I do oppose it. I know a lot of people oppose it. They just don't know it's coming, and they don't know when the meetings are. Otherwise, I think you'd have a lot more people. And I wish that the county would go and let them, everybody, from all the way up on Red House and Hackett Pike, know, and even Brooktown, Because Brooktown's gonna hear it, they're on the next ridge. And I think you're doing the citizens of the county a disservice by not making sure they know. And being able to either say yes or no against it or for it. That's all.
Ms. Mills, can I ask you a question?
Mhm.
Are you familiar with ordinance number 16-06?
No.
Okay. What that is your magistrates and your judge executive came together and they put together an ordinance. And they went by current government guidelines. And they said nothing can be done on this property if it's not met by this ordinance. This was filed and approved June of 2016. So we've had an ordinance for this for almost a year now. This ordinance was made specifically in case of something like this arised. So before, and I'm not defending this company at all, but part of the government came on board and said, hey, we've got to have to do something to provide some guidelines. So the government came together and made this ordinance, and they proposed it. If I'm not mistaken, the ladies from Kinder Morgan let me know, that's what they had to go by. Basically, all we can do is go by our magistrates and our judge executive, what they set the ordinance as, and as long as these people obey that law, we allow that to happen. That's the reason I was asking if you were around on 2000.
A lot of this, no, because again, the county's not telling a lot of the residents this stuff. So, no, I don't know it. But let me ask you, have you gone to towns and areas where these things are?
Yes,
Have you
ma'am.
talked
I
to the
contacted a
neighbors?
little town called West Winfield, New York. It's a little bit smaller than Union City. And they've just done another compression station similar to this 100 solar turbine they're going to put in here. And I contacted the codes director because I just didn't want to take social media's word and people, because I live there, I have family that live on Hackett Pike. I wanted my family to be educated. So I called them and I asked the codes director very in depth, what all went on, how everything worked, how long it took, things like that. And Mr. Raymond Donnelly, the codes director of West Winfield, New York, gave me exact, those same questions I asked him, what is the noise? And he told me it was very soft. I said, well, what was the traffic like? Because it's in a very rural area. It's basically, if you're familiar, it's almost like being on Oakley Wells Road where this one's at. Okay, so it's a very rural area, and the road condition was great. They took care of their roads there. They fulfilled their obligation, and they were done in less than a 12-month period. So I went out and researched here and another place down in Georgia where there were similar ones, because I was concerned like you. I wanted to know from the people of this small town, because I try to compare it to what we are. This gentleman that I talked to was very hesitant at first also, but he said they've been there 17 years. Now they're updating it, and Kinder Morgan's redoing one similar to ours, and he was very confident. Didn't have anything negative to say, but he was just telling me they met the guidelines that government officiating body put in front of them.
I understand they have to meet the guidelines because that's the law. My concern is these places you visited, do they have ridges and valleys? Does the noise travel as it does out on those ridges? Have you stood out there to hear how sound is? Now in the wintertime it's different than the summertime. Every season's different. But it is a big concern.
Thank you.
That's all.
No, not to get all done. We'll let them respond again. Is there anybody else that'd like to speak? Anybody? Come to the podium, please. State your name and address for me, please, first.
Edwin Woodruff Tate, 449 Hackett Pike.
Mr. Tate, do you agree to give truthful and accurate information that pertains to this case?
Yes, sir.
Continue.
My property's in the where I live is in the bottom right-hand corner there, so we're right diagonally across. And I have a number of concerns, many of which are similar to those of the previous speaker, but a couple additional points I wanted to make. One is I'd like to see a little more clarification on the pressure, because I understand this is fairly old pipe. It runs right underneath my property, right by the water lines. And the gentleman at the public meeting in Union City, I was not entirely clear, because at one point I thought he was saying that it would be greater pressure, but up to the specifications. And then later on I thought he said that there actually, it wouldn't even be any more pressure than what's currently there. And I maybe misunderstood one of those statements, so I'd like some clarification on that. The other thing that concerns me is the connection with the other pipeline, the abandonment. I was assured at the meeting at Union City that there was no connection, that the pipeline that they wish to abandon and pump natural gas liquids through is completely unconnected from this, that they are required by law to have an independent reason. I understand they do have a customer, they have an independent reason to put this compressor station, but I'm also concerned that it's part of putting additional power through this one so that they can abandon the other one. I'm very strongly opposed to the abandonment project and the natural gas liquids for the other pipeline, and so I'm opposed to anything that would even indirectly facilitate that other project, which I think is very dangerous. And then finally, I remain concerned about some of the stories I've heard, the explosion, the leak in Clay City fairly recently. I know that was an older model, and they've assured me that this is a newer kind of compressor station and much safer. But I'm not entirely convinced, and as a resident who lives right across there, I do have some fairly grave concerns about this. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions for him? There's anybody else? Come forward, please. Name and address for me, please.
Sherry Shanks,
Miss-
508 Hackett Pike.
All right, Ms. Shanks, do you agree to give truthful and accurate information as it pertains to this case?
Yes,
Continue.
I want to thank the board for having this meeting, and I want to thank the county for everything they've done. County judge or magistrates all been very helpful. I want to thank the Kim Morgan for having a meeting for us and informing us about what they plan to do. I just have a couple of questions for Mr. Maxian. I just upgraded your title. I'm a little concerned about the emissions. How high are the emissions during blowdown? How much will they exceed the acceptable rates? If you can answer that. And I think that the emissions are, I don't know what they're going to be. Are they going to be just under the acceptable rates? Because right now we don't have, we got clean air right now. It's out there in the country. It's great. And where we live right at the very top. You can see the white building there at the very top towards the, it's the center right there. And yeah, right up at the very, very top. No, on up. There you go. And where we live, you can actually see the side of the compressor station very clearly. And it's a hollow, comes up, air flows that way. So just kind of wanted to see if you could give us some answers on those things. Anyway, thank
All
you.
right, thank you. Anybody else? Come forward, please. Name and address for me first, please.
Ron Reeves, 500 Hackett Pike.
All right, Ms. Reeves. Mr. Reeves, do you agree to give truthful and accurate information as it pertains to this case?
Yes.
Continue.
The ordinance that you were speaking of a while ago, is that the one when the gentleman come from the state or wherever from? And that's it? I guess my question is, once construction starts, if something is happening that we feel like shouldn't be, what process do we go through to get somebody to look at it and get it changed?
We would contact either
Yes,
Bert or
sir.
Marty here,
Yeah.
here at the local planning office.
So we would be the body of the police staff if they were doing something contrary to the permit, the conditional use permit that was issued, then we would be responsible for enforcing that and taking the appropriate steps to fix that situation.
Anybody else? Come forward, please. Name and address for me, please.
My name is Julie Hensley. I'm at 2023 Red House Road.
All right, Ms. Hensley, do you agree to give truthful and accurate information as it pertains to this case?
I do. I just
Continue.
need some clarifications on a couple things, because I was at the neighborhood meeting also. And mine really relate to the blowdowns. because those, you know, we know we're gonna have a steady sound coming out of there. But the blowdowns that 1 to 2 minutes, I wrote down in the neighborhood meeting, now we've just heard 3 minutes. We heard it doesn't happen very often. We heard when the pressure gets increased, it goes up. I've heard lots of stories about those blowdowns can happen anytime, often, loud, disruptive, so I'd like some clarification. I need some education on what that is. And I'm not talking the emergency one. I'm talking about the one that happens because the pressure's big, so I need to understand that a little bit more. There is no landscaping gonna be on the west side, which is what I'm gonna get the view of the compressor station, because I live on Red House Road, directly across from it. I am so in tune with the sounds. My windows vibrate from the drain, so vibrations are big. We're all on rock over there. We can hear everything. So I know there were noise studies done. I looked at the thousands of pages of the application that they put in. I looked at the pictures. I've seen all the little dots, all the places where the people were sitting at 3 o'clock in the morning measuring the sound. I can hear a cat walk across the grass at 3 o'clock in the morning. So I need the county's assurance that you've done your research on what she's talking about, how that sound travels up those hollers, up those ridges, because that's what it's doing. It's circulating around there. So, I mean, if it's gonna happen, we just need to make sure that you all are doing everything to make sure that they're doing everything. There's federal regs that they have to meet. Great, go above those regs. Make that a soundproof building. You can do it. The technology's there, the capabilities are there. 9 inches of insulation, I don't know what that means, but there's ways to do this. That's all that we're asking, is to protect our environment, protect our community, and don't adversely impact our lives. That's what I have to say.
Thank you. Anybody else? Anybody?
I would like to say a couple of things.
Come to the podium for me, please. State your name and address for me, please.
Robert Tate, 449 Hackett Pike.
All right, Mr. Tate, do you agree to give truthful and accurate information as pertains to this case?
Yes,
Continue.
I don't have information to give, I have questions.
Go right ahead.
The one thing was, I was understood that this pipe is going to be run at maximum pressure, or close to maximum pressure. My question is, does the pressure fluctuate in a pipe like this? If they're upping the pressure, they assured us it wouldn't be above maximum pressure, but they are raising it to what is allowable within this pipe. Does that pressure fluctuate? No, I've forgotten my second question. When you get up here, you get a little nervous.
It's all right.
It's all right, take your time.
It's gone, I think. So, at any rate, that was the one concern I had, especially, was if they're raising the pressure to the maximum, or close to the maximum, is there a danger of it going over? That's all. But I'm sure they probably thought of that.
All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Anybody? If there's no one else, I'm gonna give Mr. Maxim a chance to come back up, rebut, answer questions.
All right. Thanks for letting me get back up here. I'll do my best to answer all these questions as best I can. Some of these we do have all the information for. Some of the other ones I'll probably have to do my best to provide context with how the question was asked. So I try to write them all down here, so I'm going to do my best to go through them. Some of the first questions were talked about distance for notifications. The requirement that we have for notifications of landowners in the area is a half mile from our property. So I know the landowner mentioned, I think she was a mile away. We limit our notifications to a half mile. That's the rules we follow. and that's the distance of which we sent letters out. I know for the public meeting, we did reach out a little bit further than that for folks up and down Hackett, or I'm forgetting the name, the Red House Road, thank you. We did notify different persons and property owners up and down the street there for that meeting, but as part of our rules and regulations, we notify a half-mile away from our property during the development of,
Just let me clarify one thing also. Marty, what's the radius for the Board of Adjustment?
We
for our-
sent certified letters to the adjoining property.
Okay, so just letters go to the adjoining property owners
We
here.
sent other letters
Yeah,
for this one.
okay.
I think it's important to note, the notices that you gave out, the advertisement that was on the road, and also the other advertising
In
that
the
you did,
paper.
it's all set by statute,
Yes,
by
sir.
the legislature as to how the
How
board
long
is
ahead of
allowed to.
time and where we have to do it at in a public notification.
It's not just have to, it's how you are allowed to notify. You don't have the funds to notify everybody, and the legislature understands that, and they set statutory guidelines for how to advertise a meeting such as this.
That's correct.
Okay. One of the other concerns is about underground water. So we don't plan to do any drilling or production of storage of gas or products below ground. We will install pipelines to the, I say pipelines, just pipe from our existing main lines over to the facility. Those will be buried 3 to 4 feet deep in our operational footprint over there. So we don't have any drilling or severe subsurface operation going on. There was some questions about vibration. We do have rotating equipment on site. It's a turbine engine. It's not a reciprocating or positive displacement motor like a car engine or anything that has a little bit more of a high torque or vibration, back and forth vibration. This is a centrifugal compressor, so it's more of a constant speed rotation type compressor, but it does sit on very substantial concrete foundations that are designed to absorb the vibration from the motor. So vibration is something we consider as part of our application. It's something we look into, and no, what's the right way to say this? Vibration will be mitigated through our foundation and slab design. So we don't anticipate any vibration transferring off of our property or outside of our facility. There's some questions about the existing pipelines, I think a couple of different times regarding pressure and usage. So the pipelines are in use now. Both pipelines that traverse the property are in service and are operational. There were some questions about operating pressures. So, and I didn't mean to be misleading at the last meeting, so I certainly apologize. The pipeline has a maximum operating pressure of 936 pounds per square inch. We will not be exceeding that limit. That limit exists today. The pipeline can operate up to that pressure today, and that pipeline can and will operate up to that pressure in the future. So there are no plans to modify the operating parameter from a minimum or maximum pressure within the pipeline system. So that pipeline can see that pressure today, and it'll see that same pressure going forward in the future. There's a question about fluctuation of pipeline pressures. This is a true statement. There will be sometimes the line has a lower pressure. There will be sometimes the line has a higher pressure, but it'll never be higher than the maximum allowable. There are safeguards in place to shut the pipeline system in, or send out an alarm if pressures are rising near the limit. So there are some notifications that our system does to make sure that pressure excursions don't occur. In the event that there is one, our pipelines are designed with a safety factor and have the ability to shut themselves in if they sense pressures at or above the maximum limit. So they're designed to shut themselves in to prevent pressures from continuing to rise. Let's see. All right, so there were some questions about blowdowns. As part of our operating protocols, we do work to notify first responders and emergency personnel in the area in advance of a scheduled or tested blowdown. Certainly, we can we can work to notify local residents in the
Do
area.
you,
in
do you
advance.
do that as a courtesy, or is that a federal regulation?
We do that as a courtesy.
Okay.
And as part, as I mentioned during the initial presentation, you know, we want to work closely with the responders so they know what this facility is and where it's at. So we notify them to make sure they're aware of what we're planning to do. Let's see here. Well, while we're on the topic of blowdowns, I think there's some question about timing. What I'll say is this: if we were to do a blowdown of the station, a full blowdown of the station at full pressure, our requirements, our specifications internally require us to relieve the pressure in the station in a time of 3 minutes or less. So that's what our system is designed to do. That's what the station is designed to do. So I know I talked about, well, sometimes it's 2 minutes, sometimes it's 1 minute. Sometimes that depends on the type of testing we're doing or what's going on.
What time of the day? What time of the day does that normally happen? You do it in the middle of the night, or
No.
middle?
No, if we're doing a testing, we would probably do it in the middle of the day.
Okay.
If people are at work or people are away from the site at school and anything else, we would do it at a scheduled time where either A, people could plan for it and be aware of it, but no, we're not going to do testing in the middle of the night. You guys got to live up to that now. Operations guys. Okay. Let's see. There's a question about real estate values. There have been several published reports that have been filed as part of the federal record on not only some of Tennessee's applications but other interstate transmission companies' application that show, at least there's no evidence to show or support that property values decline because of compressor stations or pipeline facilities. I would also venture to say there's probably not any evidence or support that they go up, but there's certainly no evidence that they go down. It's just part of development in and around property sites. And those documents have been submitted into the federal record as part of different applications. There's another question about notifications for blasting. I don't know all the rules associated with blasting. As I mentioned before, there's no blasting proposed for this construction. However, if it does get into that, I'm sure there are a lot of rules and processes for notification, not just for immediate abutters, but also folks in the area. And we would follow all those rules and regulations if we went down that path. But again, there's no blasting proposed for construction. Okay, we talked about pressure. Okay, so there's some talk about abandonment of pipelines, and I just want to be clear. This compressor station, this proposed compressor unit does not support the abandonment project. It does not allow Tennessee Gas to abandon pipelines. It is for the customer to flow incremental gas from West Virginia down to the Gulf Coast. So this project does not support any abandonment or other projects that Tennessee Gas or Kinder Morgan is exploring. This is separate and apart from that.
So the gas line that the pump station connects to, it's already got gas in it, already using it today, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
You had mentioned PSI. What's the current PSI that it average that it runs at right now?
I think we are in the 700 to 800 range. Some
So
mid
you're not at
sevens
a
to mid eights.
threshold, but you're near.
Yeah, and I think sometimes we do approach high eights and even low nines. It just depends on the fluctuation of how the system is operating.
And that existing pipeline is how old?
Well, there's portions of the pipeline that they get replaced on integrity intervals. So the original construction was back in the 40s as part of a wartime project. But we do regular integrity assessments on the pipeline. We run smart integrity tools to determine if there is integrity anomalies, corrosion, laminations, or identified weakness, and we go and replace that pipeline. So there's a continual upgrade process that goes on in all of our pipeline systems to make sure that they can operate indefinitely and with the factor of safety that they're required to do.
How often do you run a pig through an area?
You know, it all depends on where you're at. So sometimes the intervals are as fast as 3 years, sometimes they're 5 years, sometimes they're 7 years. It really just kind of depends on where the system is, the density of population around it, and just some other things that are integrated into Tennessee Gas's integrity management plan.
With this expansion project here, there's currently 2 lines running through there. Will this compressor be running both those lines?
So predominantly it'll discharge onto one line, but both lines are common. So both lines will see incremental gas flows on there, but predominantly will discharge onto one of the lines. Okay. So there are some questions about emissions during blowdown. I'll answer it as follows, which is kind of the best I can. So if we do a blowdown, the emissions will be natural gas. Natural gas, same natural gas that you burn in your homes, heat your house with, use your stove with. It's that natural gas. Main difference being is our gas isn't odorized, so you won't smell it. That kind of rotten egg or that sulfur smell, you won't smell it. It'll be non-smellable. That's not really a word, but the other thing about natural gas is that it's lighter than air. So natural gas, as it's vented to atmosphere, actually vents and disperses in an upward manner and doesn't hover around in lower levels. It's not an asphyxiant like nitrogen, which is heavier than air and stays down at the ground level. So natural gas actually, when it vents, actually disperses straight up into the atmosphere and disperses in that manner. So the emissions during a blowdown are different than normal operations just because it's natural gas and not combusted or burned natural gas, which are the emissions during normal operations. There was also a question about how far under the limits are we. So during our modeling, it looks like we are well under the limits for a minor source requirement for this station. And I say well under, I don't want to give out percentages, but it's significant, maybe as much as half the limit requirement or more. I think that's right. Okay. All right. See, I'm sure I didn't skip a page here. Okay. Next couple ones. Pressure fluctuation. And I think there was a question about construction process. I think that's right, to reach out to your local county officials. There will also be probably plenty of signs and numbers on the fence there to the access gate. That'll probably have a telephone number for Kinder Morgan that you can call if you notice something that is abnormal or out of spec or out of requirement. So there will be some permit information and numbers posted on the fence there along Hackett Pike to provide information if a phone call needs to be made. I think that's all of them.
It said that natural gas, when it releases, goes basically up and disperses within the building. If there's a problem, would the gas accumulate at that point, or do you have venting procedures?
No,
within-
there are vents within the building that allow the gas to escape. There are ridge vents and E-vents and other ways for gas to disperse out of the building. Also, if gas were to start to accumulate in the building, there's actually sensors within the building that if it sees an abnormal concentration of gas building in the building, it shuts down. So the building, the device, everything will turn off and shut down if gas is accumulating.
Where's the next nearest shut off from that building? So within the
No.
pipeline system, how far would?
So we actually,
You have
so
to go back.
on the property right now, if you look at the board, we see a 470 up there near Hackett Pike. That's a existing what we call a mainline valve setting. So it's obviously the closest valve setting we have that would go and those valves close and stops the flow of gas obviously from the easterly direction. I think going back to the west, 17 miles to the west is the next valve to the west.
It flows that way.
Correct. We're flowing west. From east to west.
Okay, so you can shut off supply coming into the facility.
From the east, that's correct. And obviously there's valves from the existing main lines to the facility itself that will also shut to prevent gas from going into the compressor. I mean, there's the building itself can turn off, the station itself can turn off. We can prevent gas from going in, we can prevent gas from coming out. There's a lot of different safety features to isolate itself from the system.
The valve at 470 are manual.
One's an auto close and one's not.
Okay, one's automated and the
I
other's,
see.
yeah.
The present flow is from northeast to southwest. The compressor has the dual capability of going either way, correct?
That's correct.
Would you anticipate ever having gas go the other way?
That's always a possibility. So
I mean, historically, Has gas ever flown
Yeah.
the other way?
Yeah, predominantly for the history of the system, it's actually flown from southwest to northeast. Just here recently, in the last 5 years or so, gas flows in America have kind of turned around and are moving in a different direction. So historically, this gas did flow northeast through the state of Kentucky. Now it's turned around and kind of flowing to the southwest. But the pipelines are designed and have safety features involved to go either direction. So the system, I don't want to say the system doesn't care which way the gas is flowing, but the system doesn't really care which way the gas is flowing. It can protect itself and operate safely either way.
I'm just looking at a safety standpoint. How expensive is it to put auto shutoffs on valves? I mean, is that a major type installation, or is that something that could be considered reasonable?
So it varies based on the size of the valve, proximity to communications and other things, depending on what type of technology you want to put in. It can be as cheap as maybe $30,000 or $40,000, or maybe as expensive as $100,000. A lot of it depends on what type of equipment is out there and what's going on.
Besides the one at 470 towards Clay City, where's the next shut off in between here and there? From 470, the one there that's out on the Hackett Pike, going towards the Clay City one, is it?
Clay City.
That's the next one.
What about fire protection in the area?
So we knew we were going to get the question about fire hydrants and everything else. So there's a water line along Hackett Pike. During the public meeting, we were asked about fire hydrants and their proximity to the site, and I can't remember exactly where it is. I know it's at least 1,000 feet away from our property. So fire protection for pipelines and compressor stations is handled by eliminating the fuel. So that's how we put out fires. We put out fires by preventing it from burning. Or preventing the fire from continuing to be a fire. So our fire protection, our fire control is not only safety devices to shut the system down, but prevent a continued supply of natural gas to a fire if a fire were to break out. We do have local fire extinguishers and other fire protection on the site for small or local or a small fire. If one were to break out, we do have localized fire protection, but a fire hydrant doesn't put out. A fire hydrant doesn't have the capacity to put out a fire. The extinguishing of
So
fuel.
you would just turn the gas off and let it burn?
You turn the gas off.
Can we see the closest fire hydrant on the map? Are you able to locate that?
It's Winky Ridge is where it's at, I think.
Wendy. Wayne.
I think so. You can see part of Windy Ridge on there, maybe just at the south.
Right. To the right.
It's like 2 or 3. No, it's not.
But they're also on there.
I'd say it's more than 50.
The pipeline you're going to use with the compression station, is that the one that has the auto shut off on it?
Which one, Dan?
So does the 2-line have auto shut, or is it the 1-line? The 1-line has the auto shut. So again, I mean, both these pipelines are common. They're crossed over, and the gas flows are common. It sounds like the auto shut off valve is on our number 1 line, and I think predominantly gas will flow out of this on the 2-line.
How I don't know.
Oh, I see that, yes.
I don't know when.
That's okay.
The question I asked Marty about this earlier too is the fire hydrant issue. You can place a fire hydrant at the front of that entry, but it's not gonna benefit because it's on a 4-inch pipe and you don't have fire flow. So the county would then have to come in and put in a 6-inch pipe to benefit the purpose of a fire hydrant. So the only purpose of putting that fire hydrant there would be for you to say there's a fire hydrant there.
Unless the pipe was increased by the petitioner at their cost.
Again, they gotta go back to the county for that.
And that's a process that they're very capable of hurrying and.
Let me just say this ordinance doesn't deal with fire hydrants, it's not one of the items, that this ordinance deals with. The next step in this process where to be issued a permit would be to go, with a development plan, to the development review team and to the planning commission. There is language in the county's land use regulations and more specifically subdivision regulations that deal with the installation of fire hydrants for certain types of projects. It would be up to the planning commission at that point whether or not they believed a fire hydrant would be required as, to the type of development this is. So,
I'm not sure a fire hydrant would be very effective
yeah, so
to stop
you're
a
not,
fire.
you know,
Even if you had a fire hydrant.
if
I'm
you
not
just want to
sure.
get your water line upgraded and make somebody else pay for it, this is, probably not, the fire hydrant's not gonna do any good, right?
Yeah.
You're not gonna put this out.
It's just gonna burn out.
You put 10 fire hydrants there and
Yeah.
a
You're not
12-inch
gonna have enough
water
water
main,
to
and
put
it's
fire
not
like
gonna do
that.
any good.
Once you show them
That's
This is very relevant
certainly,
concern of other things catching on fire.
I've
Yes,
seen
sir.
them do that.
so again, it's certainly something, if you all would want to make that part of your condition, again, though, that's not dealt with in this ordinance, but it will be dealt with at the planning commission stage, just as a matter of procedure.
Good.
Here's the closest fire hydrant, though. There's Windy Ridge, and you can see just down from Windy Ridge, I can't remember the name of that subdivision in there.
Cedarville.
That's your closest fire hydrant.
Okay.
How much water pressure is the plant gonna be, or how much volume of
Come to the
water?
podium and speak
will the
again,
plant
please.
use?
Come to the podium.
Come on up and speak.
I gotta go back again? Just that?
Just give me your name again, that way I know who's speaking.
Ronald Raines, I'm just asking how much water will the plant use? Is that gonna lower the pressure on the 4-inch line? I wouldn't think they use that much, but I don't know. I had never really thought about that.
Yeah, so all we're gonna have there is a sink, probably a couple of eye wash stations and a restroom. So I'd imagine to say the daily water use is maybe 100 gallons or less a day, probably something less than that even. So it's not a.
No more than a house would be.
Yeah.
Okay.
You really haven't addressed the noise issue, and I know that he's met the ordinances.
Can you come back up here and talk so we can get your name and get you on record, please?
Kathy Mills.
Okay, go ahead.
The noise issue, and I know that he's met state ordinances, I understand that. But the way the noise works up there is a concern, and I wanna know what are the studies you guys have done to show us that we're not gonna hear this hum 24/7? That one end of Hackett Pike down by Peacock is not gonna hear it really strong one day, and then the other end down by Union City isn't gonna hear it strong another day. The way the blast is gonna go, or possibly vibrate the ground. And the other thing I wanna know is, what are the studies on the light pollution? How much light pollution are you gonna be putting into our night sky out that direction? Because that is our dark direction. Those are mine.
So the noise studies that we conducted consisted of placing directional microphones, I think at least 6 probably, and maybe more, but I think at least 6, in various cardinal directions around our site, not only at close noise sensitive areas, but also just in general directions. And those are the sounds that we picked up for kind of existing sound. And that's what we incorporated into our models. and into our engineering design. And those, I think, went as far as maybe half mile away from our facility, as far as where we designed. I think somewhere in a little over 2,000 feet, so maybe a little less than half a mile, but at least 2,000 feet away from our building. And that's what we incorporated in. And as I mentioned earlier, after construction, we have to do an additional noise survey and sound study to understand if the sounds that the station is making is as modeled and as predicted. My colleague here is putting up some additional renderings that we had done of kind of nighttime view of the facility with lights on. Again, with the lights being shielded and downward facing, it is a minimal amount of light that does come from the site. Obviously, there would be something there that didn't exist before. So there will be some amount of light that is emitted from the facility. We do our best to point that light to where it needs to be going, and that's not up or out. It's down or towards the critical operational area of what we're using.
So your lighting would be just no more than normal building housing light, a floodlight on a building type stuff?
Yeah,
You're
so
not
I
putting
think
up big
so I think
parking lot
they're
lights or anything of that nature?
So I think they're LED style floodlights. It's not going to be your little 4-inch, maybe floodlight on the security of the back door or anything else, but it's going to be it's a light. It's maybe 12-inch.
But no
12-inch
large
square.
parking lot lights or anything of that nature?
So they'll be on poles that are maybe 20 feet in the air with the side shielded and everything else, but they do have to be elevated in order to get perspective of the light and what it's supposed to be shining on, but they'll be on poles approximately 20 feet or so in the air.
How many do you anticipate?
I'd have to look at the design drawings to understand exactly how many we have there. I don't want
But you could consider dim down lighting or something like that, right?
So we were seeing maybe 2, 3 there?
I think you're seeing at least on poles,
4.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe 6
Okay.
or so.
Now, this is simulated,
Yeah.
right? So, actually, if this was live, we would see the houses lit up on Hackett Pike back in there a little bit also.
Right, yeah, this doesn't include anybody else around us, this is just us.
I hate to go back to this valve, shut-off valve issue, but just for my own clarification, is from 470 down, once you start building the compressor station, are there shut-off valves within the compressor station that gets gas feeding to it for its compression
Yeah.
and then exiting? So you have.
Yeah,
Okay,
so
you can isolate that facility.
yeah, think about the pipeline compressor as a T type scenario, right? So as the pipes come in, the gas will go off on the T branch, right? There's a valve there. So we have a valve on the inlet, we have a valve on the outlet.
And are those auto shut-offs?
They will be automated valves.
Okay.
Correct.
I guess my biggest concern is that on that line 1 that we're tying into has a manual shut-off. How difficult is that to make an auto shut-off?
We'd have to investigate it. I mean, it's about understanding what type of valve it is, figuring out what type of modifications you have to make to adapt a modern
And maybe,
piece of equipment to it.
maybe,
So
maybe I'm
it's-
saying this wrong, maybe it's not replacing that manual shut-off, but as you come in, before you go into the compression station, that's where you put the auto shut-off.
Just what you just said.
Yeah.
Yeah, so into the compressor and out of the compressor are automated shut valves. Correct. Yeah, everything inside the station is automated.
Make anything else?
Thank you, John.
All right. Anybody in the audience have any more questions, comments? Anything you want to add? Come up. Just state your name again for me, please. You're fine.
I'm Julie Hensley,
Okay.
And my question is, 6 months after you get done building it, you have to come back and do the sound test. Who does that? Is that a third party, independent, or is that your organization?
So within 60 days of the facility going operational, we're required to do the sound test. So we'll hire a third-party company that his expertise is sound modeling and sound studies, and we have to take that analysis and submit it to the FERC for consideration and approval. So the modeling is done at Tennessee Gas's cost, but it's not performed directly by us. It's performed by a consultant that is required, and I'm sure bound by some amount of licensing and ethical requirement to do what's necessary for their submission to the FERC.
Okay.
My last question is one that I think is more local is, everything you're doing here, will you be using local resources? You know, we have a quarry right down the road here for rock, stuff like that. You'll be purchasing local instead of bringing in your own, correct?
But as much practical as that material meets our specifications and requirements, I think it would behoove our construction contractor to use local products. It's not currently in our contract to mandate that. However, I think smart business would dictate if you can get something closer, it probably makes sense for it.
Any more questions, comments from anybody? If not, I'll open the floor for a motion.
I'd like to make a motion, but before I do, I'd like to just publicly thank the P&Z staff, Bert, Marty, your staff, for all the information and the packets you provided, the discs, everything like that. It was very helpful. Also the P&Z board for all the effort that they've put into this, the Planning and Zoning Board, Judge Taylor, and also Tennessee Gas for all the information that they provided. It made processing in our questions, I think, a lot easier, and the overall understanding on a very complicated issue. None of us are chemists. So the dumbing down of the material helped quite a bit for us, and we appreciate that. With that said, I would like to make a motion that we approve a conditional use permit for the property located at 470 Hackett Pike, Richmond, Kentucky. The applicant, Tennessee Gas Pipeline LLC, located at 1001 Louisiana Street, Suite 1000, Houston, Texas, has submitted a detailed application for conditional use permit to build a natural gas-fired compressor station number 875 to the Madison County Planning and Development Department on January 31st, 2017. This document details the conditions that TPG must meet and comply with to construct, modify, and operate a new compressor station at this site. This document will be referred to and included as Board of Adjustments 1, BA1. It's basically the document that was in our packet that was sent, which contains all of the requirements set forth that I believe Tennessee Gas has already agreed to accomplish. This conditional use permit requires that TPG to comply with the Madison County, Kentucky Fiscal Court Ordinance number 16-06, which was adopted on June 14th, 2016. The conditional use permit request addresses items like, and this is a summary of what's in that document: 1, location of the compressor away from residential property. 2, equipment and measures required to attenuate noise levels. 3, measures to control surface runoff and site runoff. 4, dust control and revegetation. 5, measures for visual control and compatibility with surrounding development. 6, measures for landscaping compatibility with existing surrounding properties. 7, measures to minimize blasting if blasting is so required. 8, measures to control ambient emissions. 9, a spill and containment measurement plan. 10, providing adequate bonding for road damage repair issues to the standards set by the Madison County Road Supervisor and the state standards. In addition to this, Per this board meeting, the following conditions must be met. A 24-hour prior notification to all residents within 1/4 mile must occur when a controlled purge blast of the system is planned. Second, where practical, due to the exposed site location and this building being located in a rural agricultural area, motion censored lighting with proper shields will be used to minimize the constant light pollution that could exist from lighting. All pole lighting will be dimmed down design. In other words, when somebody drives under it or goes to it, the lighting will come on. After they leave the area, 5-10 minutes, whatever is appropriate, that lighting will dim down to a much lower light level on pole light. 3, the approval of this conditional use permit is for the use of conveying existing pipeline natural gas only. Any changes in the type of products or substances being processed at this compressor station number 877 will require 875 will require an amended conditional use permit.
All right, call the roll, please.
We got a motion, we need
Or-
a second.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, call the roll, please.
Howard Bowden,
Yes.
George Dillon,
Yes.
Ralph Oliver,
Yes.
Wayne Pendowski.
Yes.
Jimmy Rogers.
Yes.
Motion approved.
George, you want to adjourn the meeting so we can stop the?
I'll adjourn the meeting.